1 in 6 college students say that the virus changes their decision to attend college full-time, proving that 5 out of 6 college students are actually incapable of learning even the most obvious of lessons. For I'm Dr. Duke, she's Katie, and this is the Dr. Duke Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Duke Show, for I am Dr. Duke, the only program that keeps you educated on the craziness of packed in K-12 classrooms and college campuses around the world. Today, we discuss how North Carolina and California and many other states are beginning to change their admission requirements for college due to coronavirus. Hint, anybody with a pulse gets in. Plus, we dive into some real education with our daily instant classic featuring Musée des Beaux-Arts. If you tuned into the show yesterday, we looked at a great painting from the 16th century about the fall of Icarus. Today, we're going to look at a short poem that explains that picture. But we start with a new poll that finds that 1 in 6 students say that the coronavirus has changed their decision on attending college full-time. I mean, we talked about silver linings, right? If there's a possible silver lining of the coronavirus, maybe it is more kids will realize that the college experience is oversold, overblown, and overly political. That maybe, just maybe, you can pick up classes here and there. You can go to a community college while actually having a real job. If you could get a degree if you need one, when you need one, from alternative delivery sources, rather than spending a lot of time and money on the overrated college campuses of this country.
Yes, so it appears that Generation Z has been paying attention during this whole crisis because they're reading the news and it's making them actually change their minds about going to college. The Art and Science Group, LLC, did a survey and they talked to 487 high school seniors. 90% of them said they were looking at least one daily headline on this pandemic, and that 10% of them were checking in hourly. So they are tuned into what's going on, and this is getting them thinking about their future plans. It turns out about a sixth of them, or 17%, say that the coronavirus has caused a change in their future plans. Of those who are saying the change, 35% are going to actually take an entire year off altogether, and another 35% are saying they're going to actually only go part-time to college, so they're not going to go full-time. And then another 13% of that group also just doesn't even know what's going to happen. So there's a lot of kids out there who are taking a look at the news and really starting to contemplate, where their future lies.
Yeah, and you know me to play the pessimist.
Of course.
I'm 99% convinced that the following is going to happen. Number one, as much as the university bubble deserves to pop, coronavirus is rife for reinflating it. You're going to see more debt relief for college kids, right? So the federal government is going to take away more borrowing debt, which means kids are going to figure out they can go to college, not pay for it, and have it for free, number one. Number two, you're going to see already in the stories we have today, states across the nation are pretty much, in the name of corona, are jettisoning all entrance requirements, right? So pretty much now, you can be a D student.
Oh, yeah.
In high school and walk right into a college. So there's going to be no debt. You can take all the loans and then what they're going to do is they're going to find, if you're telling everybody there are no restrictions in going to college, there's going to be more money from the government to make you go. So debt reduction and all kinds of money put on the table for you to go, and you don't have to be qualified. I promise you that the progressives have found a winning issue. More kids. If we get to the end of July and corona is more or less contained, you'll see much higher levels of college enrollment from kids who really shouldn't be there, who won't have to pay much now or later down the road. That's what's going to happen.
As an additional incentive for them, too, is the fact that if they have been cooped up this entire time away from their friends, they are now going to be even more so wanting to live in those dorms and be around people their age.
And after corona, I'll tell you what the universities are doing. They're already doing the public school model. Let's make universities about a lot of things that have nothing to do with education. Because if we really do prioritize higher learning, half those kids that we let in aren't going to make it. So let's make them they're going to be social and social political activist sites, right? They already are. This just allows them to be worse. And you're exactly right. After 6 or 7 months of panic and fright and denying yourself a summer to go out and do things, I promise you when these kids get to campus, it's going to be one big federally paid for party. And what's really going to suffer is what little standards were left at universities before this happened.
And as we can see, Moody's, which is the credit rating agency, has already downgraded higher education of an outlook from being stable to negative. They said in the report that outlook shifts to negative as coronavirus outbreak increases downside risk. And in fiscal year 2021, they say universities will face disruption in enrollment, state support, endowment income, philanthropy, and research grants. But it's all going to be coming. I think it's all going to be rolling down the hill, as you said.
I think that's right. And research grants and funding.
Yeah,
no.
that part.
They're going
That part,
to. Where do liberals will always find money to dump into failed schools? Number one, and we've reached the point where the universities, like the public schools, are now too big to fail. And you think about again the role the public schools serves in American culture today, as we've seen from the stories yesterday, stories since well before the virus hit. They're places where parents can pawn off their responsibilities. They're places where parents can drive their kids to get free breakfast, lunch, and dinner, even though the kids are at home with them and they got their refrigerator. The same parents who flooded Costco and Walmart and stocked up their pantries are now leaving the sanctuary of their homes to drive kids to public schools to get breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
This is why they got all the TP, because
That's
they knew
right.
they were going to get the public school lunches.
Right.
They're going to need that TP.
Eating all that public school
after.
lunch means there's going to be all kinds of home pooping. So everybody's got their toilet paper. Think about the role then the universities play, right? The universities now, with like it or not, are the new high school. We've said this before, intellectually, educationally, but now it's happened. We're going to see colleges become what high school used to be. It's the place you go. A college degree will be the equivalent of a high school degree 30, 40 years ago. It will become more or less mandatory. It's going to become more or less free. You watch how this happens now. You don't just waive huge sections of our student loan debt for a virus that comes and goes. You've taken $10,000 away of debt, according to the first stimulus package, right? Taking about $10,000 of debt away from people who have $50,000 and $60,000 because of a disease that's going to last about 6 months, a virus, I should say. Once you're back in school and the recession continues, or there's an earthquake someplace, or you told us, right, that there are no admission requirements. So how can you then charge us the money you're charging us? If you're giving away $10,000 for something as serious as the coronavirus off their student loan debt, there's no way these kids are going to be asked to pay back most of what they owe, period.
Well, of those students who were surveyed, only 20% of them are actually confident they're going to get into their first school. But if you take a look at University of North Carolina system, or even we're going to talk about California in a minute, but these kids could easily go because there's going to be no requirements whatsoever. So when we take a look at the University of North Carolina, their governing board just approved a 3-year temporary admissions standard. Now, what's interesting about this is they actually bumped this proposal up a year. They were going to do this anyway, right. But because of Corona, they're doing it now. So a 3-year temporary admissions standard. And so what that means is that they used to have it where of the state's 16 public universities, the old standard was that you had to meet the minimum in 2 areas. You either had to have a minimum GPA of 2.5 and at least a 17 on your ACT or an 880 on your SAT. So the standardized test and your GPA. Okay. The new standard now is saying you have to meet one of those, but just not both. I mean, you still have to have a GPA of 2.5, but the ACT is a 19. So they bumped that standard up. So you can either have the 2.5 or you at least need a 19 on your ACT or a 10.
And before Corona even struck, a 2.5 GPA is pathetic.
Exactly.
Right?
It's
a 3.0 is a B average, right?
Okay, yeah,
it's more or less a C average, right?
C minus.
A C in an American public school today is like an F+++ 35 years ago.
Exactly.
A 2.5 GPA. And by the way, how do you think the high schools are going to respond to these new state university rules?
Precisely.
If you're a high school teacher and you get paid for getting kids in college and it requires a 2.5, what do you give the kids who have the 1.5 averages? You give them a 2.5,
You know what? C's get degrees.
That's right. Ooh. C's get degrees and snitches get stitches. And at least a 17, for God's sake, on the ACT.
Well, now it's a 19.
Oh, yeah, right.
Because before you had to get both. You had to get a 2.5 and a 17, but now it's a 2.5 or a 19. Oh, it's sad either way.
It is sad. And so basically that's what you see what I'm telling you. It's going to be high school now,
Oh,
right?
absolutely it is.
College becomes what high school used to be.
And what they're finding, if you look at the statistics about the GPA mixed with the ACT scores, there you can see it. The ones, in the orange are the ones who meet the GPA and the test score. But then if you look on the other side of the spectrum, they don't meet the GPA or the test score. What's going to happen is they estimate that 20,000 students fall short of one of the standards. And most are actually good enough in their grades, but not their test scores.
Of course.
Because
what
as
do the
you
grades
said,
mean?
Exactly.
Nothing. And grades have meant very little for a long time now because we know it's social promotion. It's schools get paid money based on how many kids they pass and how many kids they graduate, right? So everyone's being pushed through. You're lowering the standards. And so what's going to happen at the universities, it's already been happening, and it's been happening well before Corona. In the name of inclusion, we've basically thrown the doors open, right? It's now racist to suggest that college should be set aside for people who are capable and who wish to profit from higher education. That's an aspect of white supremacy, that you are smart enough and determined enough to succeed. And so what have we done now? We have flipped the script. Those who are capable and those who are willing will find that they will not get the quality education they signed on for. And they will be back in high school with these kids.
And if you're thinking, oh, okay, so if I only need my GPA, then I don't have to worry about that test.
Don't even take them.
No, incorrect. The tests are not optional. You still have to submit scores for them. So the state, because now ACTs are basically taken in junior level all across the nation, these students are now still going to have to take the test. We're still going to have to pay for them to take that test. The teachers are still going to teach to the test, but the students are still going to come out not knowing anything to pass that test. They're going to have a 4.0 GPA because everyone's getting A's, but they can't actually pass the test.
And we're requiring all these tests, as you point out, with the recognition that they don't mean anything to anybody.
Anything.
They change nothing.
Exactly.
Right? And so there's your system, ladies and gentlemen. All the money being spent on what is... I'm going to say it, and I'm going to coin this term. We'll put a little R by this. We now have a Potemkin public school system, right? If you remember the Potemkin villages in Russia? Remember the Soviet Union, whenever gullible Westerners like Bernie Sanders flew over there in the early 80s on his honeymoon, right? Well, whenever you had Westerners, particularly Western politicians, go to visit the Soviet Union, liberal sympathizing with the Soviets, they would be shown these villages. They were called Potemkin villages, where every grocery store was full. There was all kinds of produce, every kind of vegetable you can imagine, just stocks and stocks of right? But it was only in these Hollywood Potemkin villages, right? Everywhere else in the Soviet Union, outside of Moscow where the Politburo lived, the shelves were empty, right? And these gullible people like Ted Kennedy and Bernie Sanders, they would go to Russia, they'd be shown how bounteous our Russia is. We have the New Zealand kiwi here, right? We have the kiwi. Oh, vodka everywhere. And half-assed politicians like Kennedy and Sanders would come back and lecture America about how bad we were compared to the Soviets. We now have Potemkin public schools. All this testing, all of this emphasis on grades, all of this, it's all just a ruse. It's a Potemkin school system. It's not about educating your kids. It's not about grades. It's not about academic excellence. It's not about literacy. It's about showing parents, being babysitters for parents, being nutritionists for parents, being the moral and political factors that shape your kids' beliefs. It has nothing to do with school. These are Potemkin schools.
Potemkin
schools.
So East Coast going all the way over to West Coast, California, the University of California system, which has 10 research universities, they're going to relax their admissions requirements as well due to the coronavirus. UC President Janet Napolitano announced in a statement that it was approved by their Board of Regents as an ethical imperative. She said, the COVID-19 outbreak is a disaster of historic proportions, disrupting every aspect of our lives, including education for high school students, among others. The university's flexibility at this crucial time will ensure prospective students aiming for UC get a full and fair shot, no matter their current challenges.
Full and fair shot. This would be the equivalent of saying, okay, the coronavirus has devastated the NBA basketball season. And so what we're going to do now to make up for this is we're going to allow people to play in the NBA who otherwise aren't qualified. So if you're under 5'5", if you don't know how to dribble a basketball, if you have no athletic ability whatsoever, that is no longer a hindrance to playing in the NBA.
This is you.
It's me and it's you.
Oh, I can dribble a basketball.
Oh, please.
I used to be point guard.
I used
starting
to,
point guard.
I used to rock out when I was a little fella.
I'm sure you did rock out when you were
without reminiscing about long time ago
when
when we had some athleticism about ourselves. I think the analogy holds, right? In order to make feasible again, to make more inclusive, to account for the fact that coronavirus has shut down our season. Coronavirus has shut down our school year. What we're going to do for the next 3 years is make it much more likely that people who aren't qualified to play in the NBA get to play now.
Yeah, that's what UNC is doing.
Explain to me how it's the difference.
It's really not. Well, in California, what they're going to do, their old requirements, they look at a set of 15 courses that all students have to pass with a C to get into colleges, to be considered. That's like their threshold.
So to be a C student
in these 15 specific
gets
courses,
you into college, right?
That's to even be considered, well, pish posh. They're getting rid of that, and standardized tests for them will be gone.
Right.
North Carolina's keeping it, but California's out. John Perez, who's the chair of the Board of Regents, said, "We want to help alleviate the tremendous disruption and anxiety that is already overwhelming prospective students due to COVID-19 by removing artificial barriers and decreasing stressors, including suspending the use of the ACT. For this unprecedented moment in time, we hope there will be less worry for our future students."
Because that's what education's about, not being worried.
Less worries.
The purpose of education now is not to worry. I actually had a student. We've gone to online lessons. I got a nasty gram. We started
Story
teaching
time.
last
Nasty
week,
gram.
right? I get from one of my freshmen a nasty gram demanding that I teach the course online at the same time the course was offered during the semester, because this person only has 90 minutes a week to waste on my class.
Okay.
And I literally had to write this person back and say, look, the class is 90 minutes. You're telling me the only time you have is class time to get all your work done? My response was, go ahead and drop the class.
Yeah.
We've extended the drop deadline all the way to the end of the semester. When I give you a grade, you have a 2-week window to challenge that grade.
Oh, stop it.
And there will be a mediating team who will decide what your grade should be.
Who's on this? Apparently not you.
No, not me. I imagine that professors will be one component. But literally, after I give these kids grades at the end of the semester, they have 2 weeks in which they can challenge my grade, and this whole thing will be negotiated, right? Negotiated. We saw at Penn State last week, right? That you can change what grade you get.
After the fact,
whatever
yeah.
grade you're given, you can change it. And I go back to what you pointed out, Katie. We're doing this because of artificial barriers. Grades, tests, standards, having to know things. Those are artificial barriers to being educated. And stress, right? So the work of a university is now, what? Artificial barriers. The fact that you can't get a college degree without knowing something, that's terribly unfair. So we're going to get rid of the barriers, which are actually education, and we're going to decrease your stress by not having you do anything.
A for anxiety.
And
that's what we're
guess
learning.
what, guys? You get all these wonderful opportunities to know nothing, to learn nothing, to graduate with nothing, and we promise you, your tuition will not go down $1. It'll keep going up. Because you'll get to write it off down the road somewhere. Next time we have a Democrat president, next time there's a minor earthquake somewhere, next time somebody sneezes in a Walmart, we'll take another $10,000 off your student loan debt.
And now, time for some real education.
And I love this segment of the show. While your kids are home and while you're home with them, why don't you just take a few minutes and after I'm done explaining these pictures and these poems, why not call them up on your computer and see what your kids see? Give them a chance to see these things closer up. Take a little more time than I can right now to just discuss the consequences of this stuff morally and ethically. And so we go back today. Go back, throw the picture up, Mike. If you remember from yesterday, we did this picture. And it was a painting by Peter Bruegel in 1560, the elder Peter Bruegel, who is trying to demonstrate how suffering in this world often goes unnoticed. There on the bottom right-hand corner, you will see two legs sticking up out of the sea. That is the young boy Icarus, who has just fallen to his death. He had wings of wax that his dad made him. And with those wings, he was able to fly, but he flew too close to the sun despite the warnings, and the wax melted and the boy crashes. Notice how everyone, even the sheep, ignore it. The sheep and the shepherd, the plowman and his horse, the fisherman in the bottom right, the ship with the billowed sails, sails by, not even recognizing that he's crashed. It's a commentary on suffering. So profound was this painting, and so profound its message, that 450 years later, 400 plus years later, the 20th century poet W.H. Auden actually wrote a poem. Auden is one of our great poets. I believe he won the Nobel Prize for poetry. The Musée des Beaux-Arts is the name of the poem, the Museum of Fine Arts, where Auden, went to see this painting. And so the poem I'm about to read you is where Auden is standing in front of this great painting, and he's explaining it to us, right? So throw the poem up there, Mike. And notice the very first thing that Auden recognizes about the poem. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. If there's one thing the old painting masters knew, it was about suffering. That was a painting about suffering, and how suffering oftentimes is not something that the healthy want to embrace. The sick are not who the healthy want to be around. Go back to the verse. About suffering, they were never wrong, the old masters. How well they understood its human position. How it takes place while someone else is eating or opening a window or just walking dully along. How, when the aged are reverently, passionately waiting for the miraculous birth of death, there always must be children who did not specifically want it to happen, skating on a pond at the edge of a wood. They never forgot that even the dreadful martyrdom must run its course. Anyhow, in a corner, some untidy spot, where the dogs go on with their doggy life, and the torturer's horse scratches its innocent behind on a tree. What a beautiful poetic commentary about how suffering, even the most miraculous kind of suffering, oftentimes takes place without anybody knowing. And in this Easter week, you go back to the suffering of Christ, right? Outside of that close family of followers of Christ, the Marys, John, right? Those who actually watched Christ die at the feet. What do you think the Roman soldiers were doing? Right? Scratching their ears. They were playing dice for Christ's clothes, right? Most of Jerusalem was paying not the least bit attention to the most singularly important death in the history of the world. Go back to the poem and look at the second half of it. Now you get the specifics. In Bruegel's Icarus, for instance, how everything turns away quite leisurely from the disaster. The plowman may have heard the splash, the forsaken cry, but for him, it was not an important failure. The sun shone as it had on the white legs disappearing into the green water, and the expensive, delicate ship that must have seen something amazing, a boy falling out of the sky, had somewhere else to get to, and sailed calmly on. Go back to the picture. Do you see how the poet's words illuminate the painting and how the painting's work gives rise to the poetic vision? Plutarch, the great Roman historian, once said that painting was visual poetry, silent poetry. Painting is silent poetry, and poetry is verbal painting.
And that's going to do it for this Tuesday. If you like the show, please help us keep others educated by liking and sharing this episode with your family and friends on all of the platforms: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Parler. And if you're a fan of the audio podcast, please consider giving us a 5-star review and leaving us a nice little comment to keep us moving up the charts.
And once again, we are enrolling for the fall semester of Freedom Project. If you want your kids to have a school year that is not interrupted by any of the garbage that goes on in public schools, our kids at Freedom Project Academy have not missed a single day. That's because we have live teachers teaching to your kids in real time over the computer. Think about Freedom Project Academy for the fall. We are enrolling now for fall of 2020. So if you have a kid anywhere from 5 years old in kindergarten all the way through senior year of high school, take a look at our Judeo-Christian live online classes for next fall. Request your absolutely free information packet at freedomforschool.com. That's freedomforschool.com. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie. Until next time, remember Icarus and those kicking legs.